Hey everybody, it's Emerson and Chris, and we are doing an analysis of the Scarlet League. Um, right now we have Ben's team pulled up. We're just going to do kind of a short introduction, talking about how this meta is obviously very different than the NatDex meta. I was involved in the Smogon kickoff draft tour and got in the top 128 with my team. And it was absolutely an offensive, super offensive meta. So that's really one of the big changes. Is yes, people still have their defensive and special defensive walls, but sometimes walls can not even take on these really offensive Pokemon. So I think it's just going to be really interesting to try and deal with the major threats.
Yeah, I'm excited to be doing this analysis mostly because it's helped me think a little bit more deeply about this meta than I have since Scarlet and Violet came out. Yeah, I think the big thing that I'm getting is that I think that we really don't fully understand how Terra typing is gonna play out in Draft League yet and how it's gonna be utilized. I think a lot of different teams are kind of approaching Terra types in different ways, and I think it'll be curious to see if there's any sort of like trend as to like what sort of Terra type strategy is most effective. But yeah, I think we're gonna see a lot of high powered offenses. I would love to see some defensive teams really shine as well, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great that you brought up Terra. I even forgot that that's the main part of this meta. So some folks have, defensive Terras, some folks have more offensive Terras, or, you could be surprised in the game where you think that it's an offensive Terra, but it's really a defensive Terra. That's what I saw a lot of in the Smoke on tour was people really using Terra creatively to be able to stop different threats, to be able to just kind of power through different walls. So I'm really excited to see how everybody uses it.
Yeah, and I think the big difference between Draft League and a standard, ladder format is that with your Terra captains, you're going to be able to look at your opponent's team and decide very strategically what typing do I need to use to take out particular weapons. I think whether it's offensive or defensive, Terra typing, I expect, and maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe this bold prediction here. I feel like oftentimes your Terra captain is going to be weaponized in order to take out an opponent's big threat in some way, in a way that they won't predict.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's the goal is like the unpredictability aspect of it.
And I think I think the way that we set up Terra Captains kind of lends itself to that with the fact that, you know, anything that I believe it's what, 16 points and higher can't be a Captain.
Right.
And so necessarily, in many instances, your Terra Captains are going to be targeting those that can't be Terra Captains.
Yeah, exactly. And that was something in the Smogon tour where, okay, like Chien Pao could be a Terra captain. And yikes, that was really broken. So I'm actually especially glad that Chi cannot be a Terra captain. I had to fight that thing like 3 times, and every time I was scratching my head of how to deal with it as a Terra type. So yeah.
Before we dive into the each team, do you have any thoughts just about how this draft format worked and with us having two different divisions that um, this is going to be the first time ever we've had divisions that share the same Pokemon. So I'm curious if you just have any thoughts on that and how it's going to play out.
Yeah, that's a great talking point. So I really liked having separate drafts, just to minimize the snipes, but also felt like it really broadened the creative opportunities of people trying to build teams. Definitely the points were more difficult in this draft to really try and conserve them. I think, there were a lot of different strategies of drafting with the different points scales that we did. Obviously, a lot of like top heavy teams, but it's kind of a question about what is top heavy and what isn't top heavy. Um, but yeah, I really like I said, okay, so I really like uh the different divisions. When I was playing in the Smogon tour, you were not playing people that you drafted with. So oftentimes I was going up against the same Pokemon. And it really challenges you to think about what this mirror match might be. I think I'm especially interested in like the Chiyu and the Chen Pao mirror matches if they ever happen, just with the sheer offensive power of those. Yeah, I think it's just going to be interesting. It's the first time we've done it in our draft league, and I'm so excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be really interesting. I'm excited. I hope at least while we're in doing the next few seasons where we have a limited decks, I think it's smart for us to do these two-tiered approaches. I mean, we don't know what DLC is going to be yet and what they're going to add. There might be a time where before we even switch to national decks, if we do that, where we'll be able to do one big draft again. But I mean, looking at the numbers with 14 teams, I think we were doing the math, and it's like every team would be able to get only like one Pokemon from the top three
Mhm.
tiers if we did a combined draft, and that would be real rough.
Yeah, I mean, even think about the Napdex tiers that we did in the past 2 seasons. There were so many snipes, even though there were so many Pokemon to
Yeah.
choose from. So, yeah.
All
All
right.
right, let's kind of dive into it. Chris, you're gonna take the lead on describing your analysis of the Orlando Magikarp.
Yeah, we are starting with the Orlando Magikarp. Our order is not going to make sense to anyone. It is a very weird order that we're going to be moving through these teams. Um, But yeah, let's start with the Orlando Magikarp. Overall, this is a really interesting team, and I think it's worth emphasizing that Ben post draft made some really quick moves to his team to potentially clear up some holes that he saw. So, if you were looking at the draft list itself, I believe originally Amoongus was shoot now
Clodsire.
I'm Clodsire, thank
Mhm.
you, and Beartic was I'm
Pomo.
already Pomo, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So make sure. Hopefully you're not doing this, but don't be looking at Ben's team on the draft list if you want an accurate representation of what team is. The two Terra type users are Tinkaton and Amoongus, which I think are really cool choices. The first thing that I really want to pull out here is that I think Ben's actually throwing in a kind of traditional core in some ways with Slowking and Amoongus forming a regen core
Hmm.
that has been a staple of our leagues in the past. And then Skeledirge kind of rounds out for a fire water grass core with the unaware fire ghost combination in there. I actually think that it's a slow three mons, but it's a really, really dangerous set of Pokemon. All three of them have ways to heal. Skeledirge has access to Slack
Oh,
Off.
that's
So
true.
does Slowking, and both Slowking and Amoongus will have regen. Also, Amoongus is one of the Terra type users. Could throw you a wild card when you think you can kill it, and then all of a sudden it switches from grass poison to like I don't know steel or
Yep, that's
something.
what I was gonna say. Steel. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll pause there for a second. Do you have any thoughts right out the gate?
I love Champao. That thing is just such a threat. Also paired with Dragonite, I think there's just a lot of potential there. The fairy weakness, kind of stands out a little bit. But you have things like Skeledirge and obviously Amoonguss to like tank some fairy hits. And I really love the Terra captains of Amoonguss and Tinkaton. I'm so excited to see what Tinkaton does. I think that thing can really be a threat. It gets sword stance. It can set up rocks. I just think that really opens it up to more of an offensive presence potentially, and also that thing is hard to kill. I mean, so we have what? Okay, we have Dragonite, Slowking, Skeledirge, Amoonguss, Tinkaton. All of these are hard to kill. So, it's just obviously Ben has kind of a reputation of drafting really bulky teams. But really excited to see just honestly how people try and prepare for this.
Yeah, I will note one of the things that stands out to me is that hazards are a little hard to come by for this team. I believe we have Tinkaton has Stealth Rocks and Cricketune has Sticky Webs, and uh,
Right.
Cricketune isn't something I think you'll expect to see every week. So hazards are, I wouldn't say you should necessarily expect hazards very often. Uh, And on the flip side, Dragonite and Lurantis are the two defog users. And Dragonite is not a great defog user in the sense that
Dragonite
it
actually doesn't
can.
get defog
Oh,
this gen.
it
Yeah.
doesn't?
I don't think so.
Oh, hold on. You know what? I'm glad you're calling that out. And this was actually, it does not. Yeah. Okay. I earlier when I was taking notes, I had it on the Scarlet Violet setting, and then I switched it to the Paldea setting. And yeah, Dragonite does not get default. And this is actually something I wanted to say before we even started analyzing any of the teams, and I forgot. So I'm glad that you mentioned this. Be very, very careful with the assumptions that you make about the Pokemon on your own team
Yeah.
and your opponent's team when it comes to moves. A lot of Pokemon have lost moves. Uh, at the time of this recording, I've already had my first match, and one of the most disappointing things for me was to learn that Leafeon did not have Solar Blade anymore.
It's so
Uh,
sad.
yes, so whether or not they'll come back in DLC remains to be seen, but make sure you are double checking what you know about who has what, both on your team and your opponent's team. I don't think there's many Pokemon that have actually gained new moves, um, except for like some of the new moves that are in the game.
Hmm.
A lot of Pokemon have lost some stuff that were kind of staples. So yeah, so Lurantis then is the only defog user, and that's another Pokemon I don't think we should be expecting to see every week from Ben. So just noting that there is a hazard game
Hmm.
that could be played here in a way that you may not have to, you may not be able to with other teams.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of other ways that this team can disrupt others, with just
Yeah,
Thunderwave from Slowking, obviously Spore from Amoonguss. I think especially Spore from Amoonguss, you put something to sleep and then that gives you potentially the momentum to get Champao in and just start clicking buttons. Another thing with Slowking is it gets that chilly reception move, where it tells a joke that's so bad that snow starts. And so then you can pivot. That's basically like its teleport move, right? You can pivot that right into Chimpao. Chimpao now gets a buff to its defenses. So I think that that's a really good core to have. Um, yeah.
does Slowking still have regular teleport?
Nope.
Oh, so that's its only way to pivot now. Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
see, that's the sort of thing where it's like you got to be making sure you know how that's going to play out. It's not teleport anymore. It's bring snow onto the field. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's probably why Ben picked up Beartic here as a swap
Exactly.
option.
Yeah.
So one of I think we were probably nearing a closeout time here, but I see this team as being ready to slowly chip away at opponents with Amoonguss, Slowking, and Skeledirge. And so when you're thinking about how to win against the Magikarp, you've got to be ready to deal with those three because if they're able to whittle you down in any way whatsoever, then something like Dragonite or Qianpao is just going to be able to come through and clean you
Hmm.
up. Or the chilly reception pivot to Beartic. If you can clear out the defensive core without losing too much HP, you'll probably be sitting good. So come ready to hit hard fast. I would say, but I think that's going to be the thing to see here is Ben. I would say on average, this team is more defensive. It has the hard
Hmm.
hitters like Jian Pao, but I will note that its best special attacker is Skeledirge. It doesn't have a ton of special attack power, though Skeledirge is a great special
Hmm.
attacker. So
Sure.
don't sleep on that. But you just think about that when you're analyzing how to beat this team.
Yeah, agreed. The hazard game is probably going to be something to bring. Obviously, Ben can run boots on Chimpao and Skeledirge, but might just be a good way to kind of get some chip on those defensive walls as they're pivoting. But super excited to see this team in action.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so next we have the Cville Weaviles. So we'll go there. Okay. So I think it's very interesting because Andy and I actually both drafted Greninja, and then our second pick was also a dragon. So Andy decided to go, super hard hitters, super fast with Dragapult. I mean, having just these speed tiers, right, of Dragapult being 142, Greninja being 122, those things are just going to be able to really take out a lot of threats just by being super fast. Also, just paying attention to the amount of pivots that Andy's team has with all these U-turn users. Rotom can come in there and volt switch. You know, Garganackle is, in my opinion, one of the best users of Terra ever existed. That's my boy that I used in the Smogon tour. Basically, one of my uh, strategies was to Terra, Garganical. I'm gonna switch those two around because yeah.
I say Garganackle.
Garganackle. Okay. To Terra Garganackle into something that would counter their most like offensive physical attacker. Put a Rocky Helmet on it and call it a day. This thing is so great. You can pivot into moves with Rocky Helmet, then you can recover it off. This thing takes half damage from ghost moves, so anything that's trying to kill Dragapult with a ghost move, just switch Garganackle, and just tank that hit and then just click recover.
While we're talking about Garganackle, I just have to point out that I saw a TikTok where someone pointed out that the head of Garganackle looks like Donkey Kong, and I cannot unsee it.
I know. That's amazing.
Now everyone watching has to not ever not see it ever again.
Right. Oh man, I love that Pokemon so much. I guess yeah, just even like these top five, four. Sorry, I can't count. Just incredible kind of synergy together. Um, I like the fact that Andy has multiple hazard options, so you're, not always forced to run Stealth Rock on Garganackle. Gastrodon can pick up the slack with that. You can probably get a T-Spikes off with Greninja, because everything basically is threatened by Greninja. Um, so yeah, I think this is a really great team. An example of someone who did draft super top heavy, but even like his low tiers, I think Flareon is going to be a beast in this meta, just with the offensive power that it has and that it can Terra. Um, really like Masquerain as a sticky webs user, and yeah, those are just kind of like some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I want to throw out there. I think you mentioned the pivots for the Weaviles, but I really want to kind of emphasize that Rotom, Rotom-Mow, Corviknight, Dragapult, and Greninja are a really great set of pivots. We've seen Andy do this for years, where he sets up like four Pokemon and they just click U-turn the entire match. And just like actually though, like people need to be really ready for that. If you aren't bringing things that can threaten two or three of these at once, he's just going to be switching back and forth between
Mm.
them the entire game until he can just sweep.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Trying to just wrap your mind around how am I going to deal with all of these things that are pivoting back and forth to just get back momentum. It's playing the momentum game. That's something I learned in one of my first few seasons of Draft League, of having Tapu Koko and Rillaboom just keep pivoting in and out to get in a threat, so your opponent's kind of on the back end trying to deal with that.
What are your thoughts on Flareon as a Terra user?
I think I could be a believer in it. It's what's this thing's? Okay, its base attack is 130. Uh, that's incredible. I didn't realize that it was that strong. I think
Mhm.
its speed definitely kind of holds it back a bit. Um, I mean, if Andy brings Masquerain, gets some sticky webs up, that thing can really go off. Um, I'm not sure exactly how much coverage Flareon gets, though, is one concern.
Yeah, I think that's always been one of the things that holds Flareon back. But I think as we see, I think we've seen quite a few people choose EV evolutions as their Terra users, and I think there's something to be said there. And I think Flareon's a really good one because that special defense and that attack stat are really scary. um,
Absolutely.
and you could run a bulky Flareon and switch it to a typing that can't can't handle a lot. And I'm pretty sure Flareon, yeah, Flareon gets Wish. It'll be interesting to see if Flareon comes as a wish user at all. Its HP stats not very high, but I will note that I think one thing to watch out for here is there are some Roost users on this team, but there isn't any really cleric ability. I don't think Flareon's going to come as a cleric very often,
Mm-hmm.
so there isn't going to be much wish passing going on or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, kind of ways to counter this team. Taunt is a really good weapon against Garganackle. Um, Garganackle does not have very good special defense, so kind of bringing in a really hard-hitting special attacker. I thought about running Assault Vest on Garganackle before, which is kind of a fun thought. Also, that thing gets access to like Explosion, which is pretty cool. I could spend this whole time talking about Garganackle. But yeah. Uh Also, like getting hazards up. Corviknight's, possibly the best defogger in the entire game.
Yeah.
But that also potentially takes away Andy's hazards as well. So yeah, this meta I think is very much a hazard centered meta as well. So taking chip, his pivots taking chip from hazards might be a good way to kind of chip things down.
The last thing that I'll point out here for this team is Flareon, Gastrodon, and Sliggoo. Don't assume that these Pokemon are going to be together like easy to run through because of like various weaknesses they may have. I could see more than one match where Andy brings Flareon with Flash Fire, Gastrodon with Storm Drain, and Sliggoo with Sap Sipper,
Oh my
and
god.
you've got 3 immunities right there,
Damn.
to fire, water, and grass. So watch out for that. Yeah, that's all I'll say there.
Yeah, then you take half from ghost attacks from Garganackle, so good luck. Like all of those together is just really incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Alrighty. And next we are doing
Baltimore.
Las. We're doing
Oh yeah,
Baltimore.
Las Vegas. Yes,
Okay.
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas
Thank you.
Venusaurs. Here we go. All right. So this is Sean's team. Um, this is the first time I'm looking at this team. So, let's see things that stand out. Meowscarada is an incredible pivot. You slap a choice band on that thing and it just kind of wrecks through things. Leading Meowscarada, either clicking a really powerful U-turn or clicking knockoff. That's one thing that Sean's team does have. So both Meowscarada and Donphan get knockoff. Not a lot of things get knockoff in this meta. So having leads that can just kind of cause disruption pretty early. Definitely like the option to have Donphan or Bronzong be the rocker. Azumarill as a Terra Captain, I think I'm really excited about. That thing is already so bulky that it can, just tank hits and potentially get a belly drum off and then GG's. Also Glaceon, I'm really excited to see that thing, kind of turn into a offensive powerhouse. I think last season, Sean really like swept through. It might have been Kyle's team just with Glaceon not having very many ice resists. There's a lot of things in this meta that can be weak to ice. So if you can take away, all of the um, not so great things about an ice type, make it a different type, and still have stab on ice, that sounds great. Um, yeah, also Iron Moth, incredible special attacker. The coverage that this thing gets is just really amazing. Um, and yeah, that's kind of just some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really balanced team in a lot of ways. I will say, I think Glaceon as a Terra user, we're going on this EV train. I think this like Glaceon. The reason why its stats don't work out particularly well is because it is Ice type. But if it's any other type, defense of 110, a special attack of 130, and a special defense of 95 is really, really good. Glaceon is a bulky special attack user, maybe max HP and max special attack,
Mhm.
could be really scary against certain teams, especially if it's a particularly slow team or something like that. I think so just watch out for what Glaceon might be bringing at you. I think there's a few other things that stand out here that I think Sean did a good job of doing, which is, Iron Moth has that ×4 ground
Ground,
weakness,
yeah.
fire and poison. And Bronzong and Rotom Fan, I think, do a really, really good job of kind of protecting Iron Moth in some really, really good ways. And so, I would love though to see Sean bring heat-proof Bronzong at least once. 'Cause, it really throws people off when it's pulled off correctly.
What's that ability again?
It halves damage from fire moves.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, you sacrifice being immune to ground, but you can throw off an opponent who has a really strong fire Pokemon, and they bring that in expecting to levitate Bronzong. Yeah. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on Flamigo?
I think having a Pokemon that can hit all of the, hard hitting ghosts in this meta with a physical move and not have to worry about, something it switching in and it being immune to it. I think that that's really great. I'm not sure if there's any other Pokemon in the Paldea decks that get the Scrappy ability. Obviously, we see a lot of Flamigo on the VGC side with its Co-Star ability, where you just copy the boosts that your ally Pokemon has. Let's see, what is this thing? It has a 115 attack, pretty speedy. Um, I don't know. I think that this thing could. I'm excited to see what it does.
Yeah, I just checked. It is the only Scrappy user. And yeah, I mean, looking at Flamigo, with Scrappy, that means if you run Choice Scarf Flamigo with like, does it get close combat? I don't know.
I think it does. Yeah.
Then you're talking about something that could kill, maybe not kill Golden Go, but hit it hard.
Yeah.
And because I think Golden Go has high defense, but Dragapult is going to be seriously threatened by Flamigo, and I think a
That's
Scarf
right.
Flamigo
Both
is
of
faster
them.
than Pult.
Both of them are
Yeah.
weak to fighting without their ghost typing.
Dragapult would be neutral.
Oh, that's right. For some reason I was thinking it was dark. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think Flamigo is going to play an interesting role on this team, especially because it also is immune to ground types, protecting Iron Moth.
True. Yeah. Yeah, I think, it could be kind of like a Mienshao. It's not quite as fast, but it's a great Scarfer to get it in. If you need to, you turn out, get something else
Yeah.
in that can threaten things. Yeah,
Oh, and both
definitely.
Iron Moth and Flamigo have U-turn. I didn't. Yeah, Iron Moth with U-turn is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it sometimes is hard to fit U-turn on Iron Moth. You want to run your Fiery Dance that has a potential to increase your special attack, potentially another fire move, Sludge Wave, usually Energy Ball to take on like the bulky waters. Morning Sun potentially to heal back up, potentially T-Spikes. It's just another Pokemon where you feel like you need like 10 move slots. So
Yeah, I do think if because Sean only has 3 U-turn users, I think Rotom Fan does have Volt Switch, so
yep.
that's a pivot as well. But Iron Moth, if there's opportunities to put U-turn on it to play with the pivot game with Meowscarada and Flamigo, I think that's an opportunity Sean could use.
Yeah, definitely. Um yeah. I guess
Don't forget about Poltegeist. That's my last thought on
that that is a good Pokemon to talk about. Yeah, that thing can really like snowball out of control. It's, definitely a win con. Um I like this team a lot. Definitely really good type synergy. I think Sean was very uh uh he paid a lot of attention to his different types and definitely even his speed tiers with how things are laid out. Um any thoughts on like how to counter this team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think I don't know. This is a really balanced. I think this is one of those teams that you've got to approach with a very clear game plan. Because like when you look at it, it's got a good number of attackers. with Meowscarada, Flamigo, and Donphan.
Hmm.
And then its special attackers are Iron Moth, Rotom Fan, Poltegeist, Glaceon. It's got plenty of special defensive walls. It's got plenty of defensive walls. Like, this is a really balanced
Yeah,
team.
sure.
And so I think what you've got to come with is balance. You've got to be ready for a variety of different things. Like, I think like this is going to be a team that uh, you just need to be ready for anything, and that means you need to come with a lot of options. Don't if you I mean, you could get creative and lean hard on like a tricky strategy, and that might work. But if your strategy fails and you've lost your trick, I think Sean's going to be able to have a solid team here that can stick to a game plan between Meowscarada, Iron Moth, Azumarill, Donphan, Glaceon, Bronzong, like those six right there. Throw Flamigo in every once in a while. Like, that's a really solid team.
Yeah. Alrighty, cool. Next we
All right.
have Baltimore.
Yes, this
Okay.
is the team I'm probably most excited to talk about.
Okay. Go ahead.
uh, yeah. So okay, right out the gate, I need to criticize whoever created our tiers, because somehow whoever created our tiers allowed uh, the Baltimore Braviarys to draft a team with a base stat average of 522,
Yikes.
which I think the next closest team is the Libero, who got up to 517. I haven't checked over in the Violet division if anyone else is closer, but like, this team is ridiculously stacked. And I know numbers aren't everything, but in this instance, I actually think numbers are wildly important to making sure you understand how difficult this team is going to be to beat. We have Iron Valiant with an attack stat of 130, Mudsdale with an attack stat of 125, Berserker, Scyther, and Arcanine with an attack stat of 110, Gudra, Zoroark with an attack stat of 105, and Gudra with an attack stat of 100. There are 7 Pokemon with an attack stat over 100. Now we go to the
Well.
special attack side. We have Zoroark and Iron Valiant with a special attack of 120. Glamora with a special attack of 130. Lilligant and Gudra with a special attack of 110. Rotom Wash with a special attack of 105. And Arcanine with a special attack of 100. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Pokemon with a special attack over 100. You would think, oh, he's got all these offensive threats. The defenses must be weak. No. Rotom Wash has a defense of 107. Berserker has a defense of 100. Mudsdale has a defense of 100. And what's that ability that it has? Stamina increases its defense
Oh
when it's
yeah.
hit by moves. And Iron Valiant still has a defense stat of 90. Glamora has a defense stat of 90. This Pokemon has really high defenses. And then we go to the special defense side. Gudra has a special defense of 150. Rotom Wash has a special defense of 107. It's a little weaker on that special defense side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm listing out those numbers because this team is ridiculous. And then it's speed tiers. It has 9 Pokemon with a speed of 80 or higher. And then 5 with a speed of 90 or higher.
Wow.
So I've only talked about numbers here, and I think it's just really important when you are looking at fighting this team, you understand how strong it is.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man. I think one Pokemon that I definitely want to talk about is Glamora.
Mhm.
I love that Pokemon. Um, Anytime you hit it with a physical attack, it sets up T-spikes.
Yes.
And kind of as I was talking about in the draft discussion, people do run Glamora as like a special attacker, as a wall breaker. But if you run this thing defensively, I think it has something like 5 resistances, if not more, and resistances to some pretty common types. So if you're predicting a resisted physical attack, you just switch that in and get another T-spikes up. This thing runs Focus Sash, so you can just kind of that be your suicide lead. You're probably going to get free T-spikes set up in the process. Glamora also gets Memento, which can, get something in safely after it does its job. So I think that that's a really good asset to this team.
Yeah, I'm glad you focused on Glamora, because I don't think we fully understand how good Glamora is going to be as a hazard setter yet. It's got a lot of versatility with like Toxic Spikes is kind of silent for it,
Mm-hmm.
Um So on the topic of hazards, though, I will point out I don't know. I think countering this team with hazards may be an interesting approach for teams to take, given we've talked about how offensive it is. But if you can try and exploit one or two weaknesses and get hazards up, this team does not have the best hazard breakers in the world.
Hmm.
Lilligan is a defogger, and Scyther is a defogger. And I believe those are the only ways that it can get rid of
Actually,
hazard.
Glamora has another broken thing called Mortal Spin, which is rapid spin, but you poison the opponent in the
Of course,
process. So,
of course.
so
So once again, okay, so I'm glad that you pulled that up because that's like we have these new moves. We mentioned what was that chili whatever
oh, chili
earlier.
reception, yeah.
Yeah, these unique moves that have that you just don't think of as having similar capabilities as traditional things like teleport or rapid spin. And so yeah, so like watch out for Glamora being the hazard remover for this team. I mean, honestly, I think the key to beating this team is often going to be getting rid of Glamora without taking
Yep,
hazards on your side.
which is really hard.
Yes.
It's obviously 4 times weak to ground. But if you hit it with an EQ, free T spikes. You hit it twice with EQ to kill it because it has a focus dash. Toxic full toxic spikes are up. Um, so
I think I can't remember who said it, but someone mentioned the idea that they threw earth power on Garganackle
yeah, that was
specifically.
me.
That was you, yeah.
When
Specifically
Kyle
to
and I were
counter.
building for my one match, and I put just enough special attack in Garganackle to two-hit KO Glamora with Earth Power. So I mean that could potentially be an approach, but it's just like you have to think of these really creative off-the-wall things to just counter this thing.
Yeah. Looking at this team, there's a few other things I want to point out is so Rotom and Scyther, I think are going to play really key roles on this team in a variety of ways, and I think that's why Baltimore chose Scyther as a Terra user. Rotom and Scyther currently have ground immunities, which is going to help Glamora, Berserker, and Arcanine, which all three are ground weak. Um, but noting Berserker is another Terra user, and that brings us to the conversation about Terra users for this team. I We haven't checked Violet, but we're pretty sure this is the only team that chose 3 Terra captains.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
I think that's a really interesting choice by Baltimore here. And I'm seeing a match where you're going up against Iron Valiant, Glamora, Rotom Wash, Gudra, Scyther, and Berserker. Those 6 right there, and
Hmm.
half of them could be a Terra user.
Right. It's incredible. I'm super excited to see Scyther as a Terra user. Obviously Scizor gets a lot of love, but this thing is really powerful. It's also really speedy. It can set up. I think it can set up. It gets Sword Stance, I'm sure. Um, so yeah, and then Gudra, you can barely kill that thing anyway. It's so bulky on the special defensive side. Um, I love it.
Has Gudra gotten any new moves in this generation?
I don't think so.
I'm looking real quick because that's like Gudra is always that Pokemon that is like, I mean, you don't even need to invest in its special defense stat. You
Yeah,
can just invest in its defense stat. Um, but like, I mean, I think one important thing to remember about Gudra is it gets some really interesting moves like Acid Armor. It does get Chilling Water this generation.
which
Um,
is kind of like Scald, but worse.
it lowers the target's attack,
Yep.
which is really good as Gudra.
No, that's true.
Um, Gudra does get Curse.
Oh my gosh.
So watch out for I don't know. I think is that new?
I don't know.
I don't know if it's I don't think it was able to set up in the past.
You're looking at the Paldea decks, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I'm switching back to Sword Shield now. Okay, it has gotten Curse in the past. So um I'll just remind people it gets cursed.
You're the type of person that definitely looks into, these kind of off the wall move sets of like Curse Gudra. I love that you're able to come up with stuff like that to just remind people of.
Well, and I think that's important though here is that you Gudra, you can't rely on it being a dragon type. like bringing a fairy and an ice type
Mm-hmm.
to this Gudra fight, it may switch into being a fairy type, and then it's suddenly immune to dragon moves.
Yeah, yikes. um,
Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to bring up here is Zoroark. I think Zoroark is going to play a really cool role on this team as a pivot. I think the U-turn users and Volt Switch users on this team, we've got Zoroark, Scyther, Berserker, and Rotom W, which I think is a really fun combination of 4 pivots. I will say, I do think it's a little bit of a missed opportunity. Zoroark as a Terra user would have been really interesting.
mm,
And this is a question for people listening that Emerson and I don't know the answer to. We were wondering if Zoroark terastallizes, does it first terastallizes the thing that it's masking as? Because we were thinking about how that could be some really crazy hijinks to pull on someone. So if you're listening, maybe figure that out because we didn't want to test it because it's not actually relevant because Zoroark's not a Terra user this season. But that being said, Emerson, how do you beat this team?
hmm. Well, the hazard game is always something to potentially play. I think you should not hit Glamora with a physical move if you can help it. If you have a grounded poison type, also, good, good, good. Um, Iron Valiant is a menace. Um, Speed stat of 116 isn't that fast in a meta with a ton of like really, really fast things, but that thing can hold the booster energy and it gets a free scarf. So really be kind of careful of Iron Valiant, just being a win con at the end. Um, I'm trying to see, okay, like kind of like typing wise, Ice could be potentially a good kind of coverage or thing to focus on against this team. Otherwise, Colin's done a great job of protecting, type weaknesses and stuff. Um, it kind of feels like a team where you have to like bring your full offensive pressure as much as possible. And don't try not to let things set up. One thing to do in front of a Terra user potentially is have a Pokemon that can just click protect, and see potentially what it Terras into. If Colin chooses to Terra that turn, then it can give you a better idea of how to counter it. So
Yeah, I think those are all good thoughts. This is going to be one of the hardest teams to beat, I think. It's just so incredibly strong.
yeah, for sure.
And when Emerson and I were prepping, Emerson noted in surprise how Mudsdale has an attack set of 125. So
Yeah,
I
what
think
the hell?
don't forget that Mudsdale can hit like a Clydesdale.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that Pokemon. Uh
All
Also,
right,
I
I think
think honestly, like we didn't even talk about Lilligant. I think that thing could be pretty cool.
yeah,
As
I think it's River Dance, doesn't it?
Yep, yep. Alrighty, who are we doing next? We are doing
Beartics.
Beartics. Okay. All right, Boston Beartics. This team looks a lot like my team that I had for the Smogon draft tour. I had Roaring Moon, Goldango, and Talonflame. Roaring Moon and Goldango together are absolutely incredible. I mean, just look at the attack set of Roaring Moon is 139, and then special attack with Goldango here is 133.
Real quick, I wrote one note down for this team since you're leading on this team.
Yeah.
I wrote one note down, which was who let Roaring Moon and Goldango on the same team.
It's so good. But yeah, it's a good question. Just
We're
so
looking at
much
you, Scarlet League.
so much like type synergy, with that of Goldagon can switch into the fighting moves and Oringwin can switch into the dark moves and just really, really incredible stuff. Speed tiers look pretty great too. There's kind of a jump from 84 to 101, but I think this is pretty deceptive as Goldango often runs a choice scarf. So really love everything on this team. Sandy Sharks is really growing on me as a Stealth Rock user. This thing is like deceptively bulky as well. like a defense of 97, HP of 85. If you invest in bulk, that thing can survive a lot of hits. Get your rocks up, volt switch out. It's fast. And having a good offensive electric type is a little bit hard to find in this meta. So I really like Sandy Shocks filling kind of the roles of um, setting up hazards and offensive electric type. Speaking of hazards, holy shit, Nick has a lot of hazard users.
Yeah.
I love that Quagsire gets hazards in this meta. I mean, just like look at how cute this thing is. Besides the point that it's an unaware mon. Now it gets access to hazards. Uh, Sylveon as a fairy type also fits, I think, really well on this team. Again, kind of like a potential switch into some fighting moves, dark moves for to save Goldango. I really liked using Talonflame on my team as a defogger. Flame Body also did a lot for me with burning some pretty key physical attackers. Lots of pivot options with this team. U-turn from Serena, from Talonflame, from Roaring Moon. I just think there's a lot of different sets that Nick will bring. Pretty, wide range of stuff that he can do with this team.
Yeah, I will say I think once again we have another EV evolution as a Terra user.
That's right.
Sylveon here. Yeah, I think this is just demonstrating the EV stat line is really great for switching into a different type. And
Mm-hmm.
Sylveon is probably the best of all of them because you've got a high HP stat, a high special attack stat, and a high special defense stat. And so if you want to invest in, uh, defense and HP, and then suddenly turn Sylveon into a Calm Mind Steel type
Hell yeah.
with hyper voice, that's terrifying.
Oh wow, that is really cool. What do you think of Talonflame as Terra user?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, I feel like that could potentially I feel like the goal here is that like Talonflame is a really good Swords Dance user, but is just always susceptible to hazards and
Mm-hmm.
to it's just really frail and it really can't hit hard unless it gets a Swords Dance up.
Right.
Or it's like running Choice Band or something like that. But I think what we see here is that with Talonflame being a Terra user, I could see a world where turn one you lead Talonflame, you hit Terra turn one, and you turn out, and you're no longer taking 50% damage from
Yeah.
rocks.
And you can run like a life orb or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that like there's some really interesting creative things that I think could be done here with Talonflame, but also I think being a Terra user, Flame Body may actually be a little bit more usable here,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what type you switch to. And Gale Wings is always really cool. And I think Talonflame with heavy duty boots too. Gale Wings is a little bit more of a useful
Right.
thing because that was always the if you knew you're going against Talonflame, throw rocks up and you don't have to worry about it. That was Gen 7 and before. Um, but yeah, I'm excited to see how Talonflame's used as a Terra user.
Yeah. One thing I noticed is that Nick does have a grounded poison type with Muck, so that helps with the T Spike users. Um, I'm kind of excited to see just regular Muck out here like doing work. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Sandy Shocks earlier. That's got Volt Switch, and then
Yep.
we've got three U-Tune users with Roaring Moon, Talonflame, and Sarina. And I think that's going to be an interesting pivot game going on with those two. I mean, Roaring Moon and Talonflame as U-turn users, especially the Talonflame being a Terra user. Imagine Choice Band, Talonflame, Terra Bug.
Oh my god. That's amazing.
Yeah, with Flame Body or something.
I love
um,
that.
the only other thing I want to point out here is I believe it's Beartics are the ones who always. No, it's not. Who always got Dunsparce in the past?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, anyways, I'm actually I drafted Dunsparce as well, and I see Beartics have Dunsparce here, and I think I think it's under tiered. I think we've got a. It's now an Eviolite
Oh
user.
shit, you're
It's
right.
got multiple setup options, and with Serene Grace, I mean Body Slam as a stab move with um,
The paralyzed
Eviolite.
chance. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's 60% paralysis while hitting hard. So I would just don't when you're going up against this team, and I guess this goes for my team as well. Don't just like ignore Dunsparce because you're not going to be able to kill it as easily as you used to be.
True. Yeah. As far as like countering this team, one thing is that Goldango often, but not always often, is choice scarfed. So just kind of seeing what move it locks into and then being able to take advantage of that. Um, Roaring Moon, that thing is just hard to counter anyway. Once it gets a Dragon Dance off, it's super fast. Priority moves are good against Roaring Moon. It still is weak to like the Ice Shards and Mock Punches and stuff like that. Um, Hazards, I mean too, but lots of great hazard removal options with Talonflame, Serena, and Avalugg. I always am excited when Avalugg gets to see a battle because I feel like it just does things that I'm not expecting it to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I will say I want to make sure people see this. Um, there are not Avalugg is the defensive wall of this team. Obviously, there are a few Pokemon that are not like low defenses, like Zarina and Goldango have high 90s for their defensive stat, but only one Pokemon is above 100 on its defense, and that's
Mm-hmm.
Avalugg. And so I do think it's interesting that um, this team may rely on Avalugg for its defenses, and it would have been really interesting to see Avalugg as a Terra user.
That's true. Yeah, that would have been cool. Yeah.
That's all I have.
All right. On
Two
to the
teams left.
next.
Libero.
Libero.
FC.
Central Ohio Libero FC. And go ahead and take the lead.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Kyle's Central Ohio Libero FC. So where to start here? So I'm going to start with Orthworm because I know Kyle was debating back and forth as to whether or not to get this Pokemon. And I just think it is. I think it's going to end up being really, really good. One thing that kind of is hidden about Orthworm is that it is a pivot.
Mm-hmm.
It is a weird pivot.
Yep.
It's one of those new moves, Shed Tail. But don't like you've got to be ready for it to use that. Like you can't just forget that it's a thing that will happen. Also, Orthworm is immune to ground types. Usually, that's also something you have to be ready for. Um, I think what really stands out to me about this team is there's a lot of really just fun Pokemon on it. I mean,
Mm-hmm. For sure.
the Pokemon whose name I have no idea how to pronounce, Graphii or whatever.
Graphii, I think. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that one's weird. I actually honestly know nothing about it. I just know it has weird stuff that it can do. It's got like that ability copying thing, and then it's got Unburden
Yep.
and like
It gets Prankster. It can do like Prankster
Prankster. Yeah,
Parting Shot. It's one of the few Pokemon that still has Toxic. Um,
yeah. So just be ready for it to do weird stuff to your team. But I think what we really need to focus on here is this Pokemon's offense is real powerful. It's not like, every Pokemon has high attack like the Baltimore Braviarys, but Salamence plus Great Tusk are two really, really great attackers with physical attack over 130. And
yeah.
then Chi-Yu is the special attacker of this team with Rotom backing it up. And I do not forget that Salamence actually has a high special attack. It
It's
like
true.
it can hit hard when it needs to. And then I'll just remind people, don't forget about Drift Blim as a calm mind unburden user. I
Mm-hmm.
don't expect Drift Blim to come every week, but if you forget that it's a thing and it shows up, you will lose.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's another Pokemon that I'm just like excited to see, kind of do its thing. I kind of wish that there were like more terrain users, like or terrain setters in this meta, because if there was like an electric terrain setter, I guess there's Pinchurchin, but you know it kind of sucks. But Grafaiai and Drifblim, getting that electric seed like unburden boost, really cool.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to point out with this team is that it has four ground immunities, and two of those are Terra users. So we've got Salamence, Driftblim, Rotom Frost, and Orthworm, all immune to ground.
Yeah.
And once again, you'll notice I'm mentioning Orthworm. We've also got some really great defensive mons here. So Orthworm and Great Tusk both have a defense stat of 145 and 135, respectively. Screamtail has a SPDF of 115, and I believe Chi-Yu's at 120. So there's some really good defensive Pokemon here, but I want to make sure people don't forget that this could be a sneaky Sun team.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, Torkoal's the only thing with drought, but I believe this team has. I pulled up the stat for it. There's how many Sunny Day users? Shoot, sorry, my
That's okay.
thing is falling off the page. There are 8 Sunny Day users. And Sunny Day is pretty prolific throughout, a lot of Pokemon. But like, I mean, Great Tusk and Screamtail will benefit from Sun. Chi-Yu will benefit from Sun. Um, and just watch out for uh him throwing Sunny Day on something, and then all of a sudden, booster energy isn't even needed for Screamtail and Great Tusk.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Chi-Yu in the sun is astronomical. Um, I just call it the broken fish whenever anyone tries to reference it. I was watching a Blunder video and he was using Chi-Yu back when Chi-Yu was still legal in OU, and he called it Jesus Christ. Um, so I'm definitely a fan of the broken fish. Even resisted, Pokemon that resists its stab. I mean, you're still potentially doing over 50%. Um, Great Tusk is so bulky. That thing can run so many different sets. You can run it banded. You can run it with an AV. Just a lot of different options. Screamtail also has so many weird like setup things or utility moves. Um, so I think having Orthworm Orthworm still gets Shedtail. So we didn't ban Orthworm Shedtail, but we did ban it with regen Cyclizar. So using Orthworm to potentially get in one of his setup sweepers like Salamence, like Chi-Yu. Um, and yeah, I think that that's incredible. I love all of the ground immunities on this team. Uh, you know, Kyle was when I was building my team for BDSP and I had Heatran, that I had a lot of ground either immunities or resistances. With Heatran, he said it was the most protected Heatran. I think this is one of the most protected Chi-Yus, with all of the ground immunities, and just switch-ins to its threatening opponents. So super excited to see this team do its thing. Also, I got to give it to Rotom Frost. I think that it might be a really good Terra user too. I love the Rotoms, obviously. So I'm excited to see what Rotom Frost does.
Yeah, I'll close with talking about how I think Salamence as a Terra type is a really interesting choice. And at first I didn't like it, but now the more that I've stared at it, I actually think it's really smart. Because I don't expect that we'll see it turning into anything other than dragon or flying very
Mm,
often. But I think the whole point is to get rid of the times 4 weakness to ice shard.
yeah,
Salamence has just enough bulk to tank at least one ice shard, if it's not times 4 weak to it.
sure, right. Yeah. Also,
And
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, he has a double like intimidate core with Salamence and potentially Stanler, although you might not see Stanler every week. But then also Moxie with Salamence and Moxie with Quaxwell. Um,
Oh,
I
yeah, good catch.
I really love both of these abilities on Salamence. Um, so yeah.
All right. I think you know, any thoughts just to end it out on how you beat this team?
Um, I'm gonna, be beating a dead horse or whatever, but hazards, something to counter Chi is to force it to wear boots, instead of, wearing choice specs or having its choice scarf. So, that's how I beat it when I was in the Smogon tour, is making sure that Stealth Rock was up, and more often than not, it would come in and, take its 25% and just slowly chip it down. I would sack something, bring something in that could counter it. They would switch out, and always they're taking, 25% when it comes back in. Um, Looks like, Kyle paid attention definitely to his typings, maybe a little bit of a fighting weakness, but on some of the Pokemon that probably aren't coming every week. So again, kind of like a try and beat offense with a bunch of offense potentially, or just have things that can tank Chi use hits, potentially an AV user. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing. You got to come out the gate hitting hard because if you let anything like Salamence or Driftblim or Screamtail set up, you're probably gonna lose.
yep,
Not in every case, but like I think if you just come out the gate hitting hard, like if you're able to drop Orthworm but below 50%, so it can't shed tail set up,
sure.
like those, like if you just don't let up on the attack. Because I will note there isn't a lot of momentum on this team. I believe Draftrai is the only U-tuner and Rotom Frost is the only Volt switcher. So you may be able to get the pivot game going in a way that this team can't keep up with.
Did you call it Giraffe?
Graph, I mean, whatever.
I'm just making fun of you.
I
Um,
deserve to be made fun of. I just read what's on the page.
yeah, I agree with the lack of momentum. Although with Grafia, I think that thing has the potential to come a lot of weeks with the parting shot,
Yeah,
prankster parting shot, and U-turn. Again,
that's a good
where
point. I always forget that Prankster and Parting Shot work that way together.
yeah, which is again, kind of another way to potentially get your sweeper in safely, or your wall breaker to, really take something down, of its offensive presence, to then just bring something in and click buttons. So,
Yeah. All
alrighty.
right.
Last but certainly not least,
Definitely least.
definitely not least, Punxsutawny Pachirisu with Adam Schmidt. Um, I actually love this team. I love everybody's team, but this particular, maybe on first glance, doesn't look like, maybe a super offensive team. But Baxcalibur, this thing is so strong. I think that people sleep on Baxcalibur.
Hmm.
It's bulky. It can really tank hits. It has that ability thermal exchange, where if you get hit by a fire attack, you like increase your attack or something like that. It like, I don't know. It's not an immunity, but it is still good.
And it
Um,
cannot be burned.
it can't
It
be
is an
burned. That's
attack
it.
user that cannot be burned and is not a fire type.
Yep. That's pretty amazing. Um, uh, Espathra, I hate this thing, but I love it. I got swept by it in the Smogon tour. It's just this broken ass, funny looking ostrich bird that even in the game, like, just like bombards you as you're just trying to walk around and like hatch an egg or something. Um, so I think that there's a lot of opportunities, for Adam to kind of get this thing in and try and get it set up. He does have a lot of momentum. You got the Volt Switch from Jolteon, you got the Volt Switch from Iron Treads potentially. Um, and yeah, I think that thing is just such a threat. Kyle and I were talking about the draft and how I made it a point to, I was like, I need to draft something to counter Espathra. Like, in this meta, I need to do that, or else I will just get entirely swept by that thing. Um, so I love Iron Treads as, the kind of compressed role of both, the spinner and the stealth rock setter. I think Glimmet could do. I think it can be kind of, like a mini Glamora. I'm kind of excited to see if Adam uses it similarly. It can still have a focus sash. It would still get that toxic debris off. Um, I am super excited to see what Frostmoth does because its typing is just so abysmal. But if it can Terra into something where it's not weak to every single fucking thing, then I think it can be really amazing. So
Can I give you a hot take?
yeah, what's the hot take?
I think Frostmoth is the best Terra choice in the entire draft.
Yo, why do you think that is?
Because Shield Dust is one of the best abilities in the game. It's like, in case people don't know, sorry, not Shield Dust. Ice Scales is one of the best moves in the game. It receives half damage from special attacks. That's really, really good.
Mm,
And so, while it's still weak to physical attack, one of the reasons why Frostmoth is always hard to set up as a Quiver Dancer is just its typing is so bad. It's just weak to so many things. But if you turn this into something else, depending on what team you're going up against, um, that you could run a max HP, max defense with
hmm.
ice scales, and then start quiver dancing, Terra into whatever you're Terra into, Terra, excuse me, Terra into, and you're good to go. I mean, this Pokemon gets like Giga Drain and stuff like that. And I want to point out that it also gets Aurora Veil.
Ooh.
And I that would be a way to counter its defense weakness. And so I'm imagining a world where, you know, Adam runs Baxcalibur with Snowscape.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Um,
see if there's any other like Snowscape users.
it's just Frostmoth and Baxcalibur.
Is it okay?
Yeah, but like both of them will. What is the new way that Snow works? It boosts Ice types. What stat?
Defense.
Yeah. So there's my helping my point here. Aurora Veil with like it could just switch into Ice type.
Mm.
I well here's a question that maybe once again posing to the group. If Frostmoth Terras into something else, does it still get the defense bonus from Snow?
I think it has to be an ice type still.
It still has to be an Ice type.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But I think it's just worth emphasizing that Frostmoth is losing all of its problems by being a Terra user. I feel,
Mm-hmm.
and you just don't ignore it because you think you can just throw a fire move on it and kill it and be done.
Yeah, I really love also just kind of pivoting to like defenses. So, Florges being a really great special defense wall, and then Dondozo being one of the premier defensive unaware walls to just, tank hits and start setting up curses or just potentially slowing down the momentum from another team that is trying to get off the rails with its offensive pressure. Breloom is also another Pokemon that can shut teams down with Spore. Having priority Mach Punch in this meta is actually really important with all of the dark types. So I think I think that yeah, Adam drafted Breloom. He was a wheel pick and drafted Iron Treads and Breloom like first round, first and second round, which is I think really great. Um, yeah, I really like this team, how bulky it is, and also how offensive it is. So
I will say one thing that I think is really interesting about this team is that it has possibly the lowest base stat total in the.
mm,
I love my numbers, 493 base stat totals below 400, 500. But that is deceptive because both Glimmet and Fletchinder are not fully evolved. So we
right.
have two Eviolite users there potentially that you just gotta I'm interested to see how Fletchender plays out. I don't know if I like that pick, but maybe Adam will prove us wrong.
Yeah, I think it's obviously just kind of a worse Talonflame. But with Eviolite, I'm not sure what its stats look like. But
Still pretty bad.
yeah,
I'm not sure if you
yeah,
want to run Eviolite on it. I don't know if that's worth it.
yeah. I think though Adam having Iron Treads is with Rapid Spin support is really incredible.
Yeah.
Rapid Spin is just such like a coveted move in this meta. Um, I really like using Iron Treads. I have it in another draft league that I'm running right now. Having the pivoting potential with Volt Switch. Just even ground steel stab is really great. You can run a balloon on it, so you're not like weak to ground. Um, it can do a lot of different things. But I will say, absolutely, the top threat is this stupid ass Ispathra bird. And if that thing gets behind a sub, oftentimes people run it like fully defensive. So then, you can just kind of set up with Calm Mind and get your boost going with that and the speed boost. If that thing is behind a sub, it's really hard to try and counter it. Um, so speaking of counters, you know, things to counter Spathra include unaware Pokemon, include encore Pokemon. If you have something like Whirlwind or Roar, I think Roar goes through sub, if I'm
Yes.
not mistaken. Um, it's just hard because like you have to, once it gets boosted its speed, you have to be able to tank a hit to be able to roar it out. So it can really snowball really fast. Um, but yeah,
I'm excited to see how this plays out.
definitely.
Yeah. I will say I think one of the most disappointing things about Scarlet Violet is that it didn't give Florges an ability that's usable in singles.
Yeah, that's true.
Unless unless Florges had been selected as a Terra type user, which
Mm,
in that case, Flower Veil would would have worked if you turned Florges into a grass type.
that's really interesting. What does
Yeah.
Flower Veil do?
It is really good. This side's grass types can't have stats lowered or status inflicted by other Pokemon. So,
Wow, it's
uh,
kind of like a Goldengo, but for Florges.
yeah. So just pointing out a potential missed opportunity. But if you're thinking about Florges for future seasons, people uh, think about it as a Terra user. Yeah, I'm excited for this team to see how it plays out. I think Dondozo is like one of the most ridiculously designed Pokemon in this game, and it's just it's so memey that and gimmicky, but like I love that it's like actually usable. I think when I encountered it when playing the game, I thought it was like ridiculously stupid and
Mhm.
not good. But now that I have actually looked at its stat line, it's good. It's good. It's a good Pokemon.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
Basically any type of physical attack or counter you have to this thing is just gonna fail, unless for some reason you can have a put a choice band on it and two hit KO it. That thing, I mean, can
Like
always
what
be a win con with if your opponent always only has physical attackers left, and you have a Rocky Helmet on it, or you just have Curse and you just win. So
I feel like Dondozo is what Whale Lord should be.
totally, yeah.
So I will note we haven't talked about, well, I think you talked about Glimmet a little bit, but
Mhm.
we just got to be think about Glimmet as a cheap version of Glamora, and don't
Underestimate
like,
it.
yeah, it'll throw toxic spikes at you, it'll throw rocks at you. Um, yeah, I think that's he's probably, I imagine Adam will use it as a suicide lead in a lot of
Hmm.
instances.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing that Glimmet and Glomora get, they do get that corrosion ability, so you can toxic Goldango if you really want to. Um, that would be pretty cool. So,
It's a good call. I will also just a lot of people forget about it as a thing, but because so many people run Technician on Breloom, but Breloom has some weird stall sets with Poison Heal, so don't forget about it. Uh, yeah, Toxic Orb is still in the game, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So there are some powerful sub Breloom sets, especially with Spore and
Hmm.
Poison Heal that are almost unkillable.
Yeah, and then you have the loaded dice item, which you can get, tons of power out of your bullet seed.
With
So,
Technician, yeah.
yep. I wanted to go back on my idea about poisoning Goldango because
Yes.
corrosion is it works regardless of type, but no status moves ever work against Goldango. So like if you try and
Oh,
toxic it, it won't work even though it's corrosion and it's it could be poisoned based on that. Um, yeah, no status moves work against Goldango unless you have a mold breaker Pokemon, which are few and far between. I don't know if anybody drafted a mold breaker Pokemon. So,
I don't know. And Corrosion won't work on Garganackle either.
yep. So,
So the only other things I'll note is I think this team has 3 U-turn users, though one of them is um, Frostmoth. So I don't think that. So momentum is going to be a little bit difficult for this team. It does have Jolteon as a Volt Switch user, and what's really interesting is that Iron Treads gets Volt
yep.
Switch. So Iron Treads is not a special attacker, but it can pivot with Jolteon and Fletchinder and Espathra. So, but I do think that this team's going to be hard to use pivot moves because other than Jolteon and Fletchinder, kind of its pivot moves aren't really powerful.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see if Adam's able to find ways to use pivot momentum at all,
Sure.
especially with Jolteon and Florges both having Wish.
Yeah. Oh, that's another good point. Having a good wish user is very valuable in this meta. So, all right. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Any like final thoughts as, we're kind of wrapping up or things that kind of stood out to you as we were doing our analysis?
I really hope people just kind of have fun with this season and don't take it too seriously. I think
Yeah.
we're all kind of going into this new and have no idea how terastallizing is going to make it chaotic or not, and whether or not we like this Terra Captain system. There may be a lot of sweeps. I mean, this is going to be an
Hmm.
offensive meta, I think. Like don't feel like because you get 4-0'd or 5-0'd that like you played bad or anything. I think there's going to be a lot of moments where this game is very much do you get your opening
Right.
and do you take it? And I think a lot of the games are going to be really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a really great reminder. And I saw that a lot in the Smoke on tour, and it can be very frustrating. You think, oh my gosh, this is like a skill issue that I got 6 0'd, but maybe you just literally didn't draft anything that can take on Espathra, or again something got set up that you didn't intend to, and it just kind of rips through your team. It's not a skill issue. It's about how freaking intense this offensive meta is.
yeah,
And I really hope that people have fun with it too. We have got a lot of new Pokemon, and like, there's not hardly any new Pokemon that I don't like, which I think is really cool. Almost all of them can be used, you know, uh, on draft teams just in general. So yeah, again, just really excited to see what people do with all the offense and different Terra types and different ways of using the Terra types. Um, Overall, just really excited.
cool. Yeah, I think that's a wrap.
Cool. All right. Peace out, y'all.
Later.